Poetry is a form of literary expression that uses language in a creative and imaginative way to convey emotions, ideas, and experiences. It often employs a unique and structured use of language, including rhythm, meter, rhyme, and figurative language, to evoke emotions and paint vivid imagery in the reader's or listener's mind. The evolution of poetry is a complex and multifaceted journey that has taken place over millennia. Here is a brief overview of the key stages in the evolution of poetry. Oral tradition. Poetry likely began as an oral tradition, where stories, songs, and epics were passed down through generations by word of mouth. Early forms of poetry were often used to record historical events, cultural values, and religious beliefs. Ancient poetry. In ancient civilizations like Mesopotamia, Egypt, Greece, and Rome, poetry played a crucial role in documenting important events, celebrating heroes, and exploring philosophical and mythological themes. These early poems often followed specific structures and meters. Medieval poetry. During the Middle Ages, poetry took on various forms, such as epic poetry, ballads, and troubadour songs. The works of poets like Dante Alighieri, Geoffrey Chaucer, and the troubadours in the 12th and 13th centuries contributed to the diversification of poetic styles. Renaissance poetry. The Renaissance period, 14th to 17th centuries, saw a revival of classical influences, resulting in the emergence of sonnets, pastoral poetry, and metaphysical poetry. Poets like William Shakespeare, John Milton, and Petrarch made significant contributions to this era. Romantic poetry. In the late 18th and early 19th centuries, the Romantic movement celebrated nature, emotion, and individualism. Poets such as William Wordsworth, Samuel Taylor Coleridge, and Lord Byron explored themes of imagination, emotion, and the sublime. Modern poetry. The 20th century saw the emergence of diverse and experimental poetic movements, including symbolism, imagism, surrealism, and free verse. Modernist poets like T.S. Eliot, Ezra Pound, and William Carlos Williams broke traditional conventions and explored new ways of expression. Contemporary poetry. Contemporary poetry encompasses a wide range of styles, from traditional forms to experimental and avant-garde works. It often reflects the complexities of modern life and addresses issues such as identity, social justice, and technology. Performance poetry. In recent decades, there has been a resurgence of spoken word and performance poetry. This form of poetry is often presented in live settings, and poets may incorporate elements of theater, music, and visual arts to engage the audience. The evolution of poetry has been marked by a constant interplay between tradition and innovation. Poets have continually pushed the boundaries of what can be expressed through language and have adapted to the changing cultural and technological landscapes. As a result, poetry remains a vibrant and evolving art form, reflecting the times in which it is created. Detailed exploration of the evolution of poetry. Postmodern and contemporary poetry. In the mid-20th century and beyond, poets continued to experiment with form and content. Postmodern poets, like John Ashbery and Frank O'Hara, embraced ambiguity, intertextuality, and a fragmented style. The Beat Generation, with poets like Allen Ginsberg and Jack Kerouac, explored themes of counterculture and non-conformity. Confessional poetry. In the mid-20th century, a group of poets, including Sylvia Plath and Sexton, practiced confessional poetry, which often delved into intensely personal and emotionally charged subject matter. This style emphasized introspection and the poet's own experiences. Slam poetry. Emerging in the 1980s and 1990s, slam poetry is a form of spoken word poetry that prioritizes performance and often addresses social and political issues. Slam poetry competitions have gained popularity, providing a platform for poets to engage with audiences directly. Digital and online poetry. With the advent of the internet and digital media, poetry has found new platforms for distribution and consumption. Online communities and social media have enabled poets to share their work widely and engage with a global audience. This has given rise to digital and multimedia poetry, which incorporates elements like hyperlinks, videos, and interactive formats. Global and multilingual poetry. Poetry has always been a universal form of expression, but in the modern era, it has increasingly transcended cultural and linguistic boundaries. Contemporary poets often draw from diverse traditions, languages, and cultures, leading to a rich tapestry of global voices. Eco-poetry. With growing environmental concerns, eco-poetry has emerged as a distinct genre that explores the relationship between humans and the natural world. Poets like Mary Oliver and Wendell Berry have made significant contributions to this subgenre. Poetic forms and revivals. Despite the evolution of poetry, many traditional forms, such as sonnets, haikus, and villanelles, continue to be popular. Additionally, there have been revivals of interest in specific forms and styles, such as the ghazal, a poetic form with Middle Eastern origins. Political and social engagement. Poetry has often been used as a powerful medium for social and political commentary. Poets have addressed issues like civil rights, feminism, LGBTQ+ rights, and more, using their work to advocate for change and express dissent. Multimodal poetry. Some contemporary poets have integrated poetry with other art forms, creating multimedia works that incorporate visual art, sound, and performance. This blurring of boundaries between different artistic disciplines results in unique and dynamic expressions of poetry. The evolution of poetry is a testament to its adaptability and enduring relevance as a form of human expression. Contemporary poets continue to draw inspiration from the rich history of the art while forging new paths and experimenting with innovative approaches, making poetry a dynamic and ever-evolving medium for creative communication. Let's delve into the evolution of poetry in more depth, exploring the major movements and developments in different eras. Ancient poetry, 2000 BCE, 500 CE. Poetry in ancient civilizations was predominantly an oral tradition. This period saw the emergence of epic poems like the Epic of Gilgamesh in Mesopotamia, the hymns of the Rig Veda in India, and the epics of Homer in Greece, the Iliad and the Odyssey. These early works celebrated heroic deeds and explored the relationship between humans and the divine. Medieval poetry, 500 to 1500 CE. Medieval poetry encompassed a wide range of styles, from epic narratives like the Divine Comedy by Dante Alighieri to lyric poetry and troubadour songs in Europe. The Middle Ages were marked by a strong influence of religion on poetry, with works like Geoffrey Chaucer's The Canterbury Tales and mystical poetry by poets such as Rumi and St. John of the Cross. Renaissance poetry, 14th to 17th centuries. The Renaissance witnessed a revival of classical influences and a shift toward humanism. Poets like Petrarch and William Shakespeare explored themes of love and individualism, while John Milton's Paradise Lost was a monumental epic that fused religious and literary themes. Romantic poetry, late 18th, early 19th centuries. The Romantic movement, led by poets like William Wordsworth, Samuel Taylor Coleridge, and Lord Byron, emphasized emotion, nature, and individual experience. Poets expressed a fascination with the sublime and a deep connection to the natural world. Victorian poetry, 19th century. The Victorian era featured poets like Alfred, Lord Tennyson, Robert Browning, and Emily Bronte. Poetry during this time explored themes of morality, society, and the impact of industrialization. The poems often exhibited more formal and structured styles. Modernist poetry, late 19th, early 20th century's modernist poets, including T.S. Eliot, Ezra Pound, and H.D. Hilda Doolittle, rejected traditional forms and embraced experimentation. They explored themes of disillusionment, fragmentation, and the alienation of the individual in a rapidly changing world. Contemporary poetry, mid-20th century to the present. Contemporary poetry is marked by diverse styles and influences. It includes movements like the Beat Generation, Allen Ginsberg and Jack Kerouac, the Confessional Poets, Sylvia Plath and Sexton, and the New Formalists. Contemporary poets often engage with social issues, identity, and technology. Performance and spoken word poetry, late 20th century to the present. The latter half of the 20th century saw a rise in performance poetry and spoken word, characterized by live readings and often addressing societal concerns, identity, and personal experiences. It includes poets like Maya Angelou, Saul Williams, and Sarah Kay. Digital poetry and multimedia poetry, late 20th century to the present. The internet and digital media have opened new avenues for poetic expression. Digital and multimedia poetry may involve hyperlinks, interactive elements, and visual or audio components. Poets like Jason Nelson and Young-Hae Chong Heavy Industries have embraced these digital forms. Global and multilingual poetry, late 20th century to the present. With increased globalization and migration, contemporary poetry has become more inclusive and multilingual. Poets from diverse backgrounds draw on their cultural and linguistic heritages to create a rich tapestry of voices. Eco-poetry and activist poetry, late 20th century to the present. In response to environmental concerns and social injustices, poets have turned to themes of ecology and activism. Prominent eco-poets like Mary Oliver and activist poets address pressing issues such as climate change and social inequalities. Multimodal poetry, late 20th century to the present. Poets have expanded the boundaries of the medium by integrating poetry with other art forms, creating multimedia works that combine visual art, sound, and performance. These experiments push the definition of poetry beyond traditional written forms. The evolution of poetry reflects not only changes in literary style, but also shifts in society, culture, and technology. Throughout its history, poetry has proven to be a flexible and enduring art form that continually adapts to the needs and sensibilities of each era while retaining its core qualities of emotional resonance and artistic expression.